Well, sequestration is actually the big name for billions of dollars in automatic federal spending cuts. It's scheduled to go into effect on Friday. That is, unless a deal is reached. The president says it'll lead to layoffs for hundreds of thousands of Pentagon employees, first responders, airport security personnel, and thousands of other federal workers. Joining me now to talk about it, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator, it's great to have you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
This sequestration has become such a political theater over the last few days, and a lot of the Republicans are saying, let's just let the president have it and see what he can do with it. Is that a good idea? And what do you propose to do about sequestering?
Well, number one, the reason it's a bad idea is it devastates the military. We've already cut $489 billion out of the Department of Defense. Sequestration would add another $600 billion, which would really unravel our military. This idea that Republicans have of let it go into effect and watch the president fix it is really not leadership. Don't you think that's what's wrong with Washington? I thought we were the party of fiscal responsibility. The Republican House passed a replacement for sequestration. Our Democratic friends are going to raise taxes, which is a bad idea. So I think Republican senators should put a plan on the table rather than turning the government over to Barack Obama to find the cuts and just watch him do whatever he'd like. I don't like that proposal at all.
So do you plan to work with some of your Republican colleagues in the Senate, put a plan on the table and say, here it is, Mr. President, this is our plan?
There you go. Well, I want to get my Republican colleagues to come up with a plan. And if we start laying people off and you get furloughed 1 day out of 5 where you don't get paid, I think members of Congress, we should have our pay docked. If we're going to ask defense contractors, people in the government to suffer because we can't find a way to cut $1.2 trillion over the next decade, instead of firing the soldiers, we're to fire the politicians. So I'm going to have a sense of the Senate resolution that we reduce our pay by 1/5.
You know, I think that is a great idea that most Americans would applaud, just as they are here in the studio today. You voted against the bill that authorized sequestration. The president was the one who proposed it. I want to play a little videotape of the president speaking about this 2 years ago.
Already, some in Congress are trying to undo these automatic spending cuts. My message to them is simple. No. I will veto any effort to get rid of those automatic spending cuts to domestic and defense spending.
This was his idea, yet all this past week he's been traveling over the country blaming Republicans. Does he have a lapse of memory, or is he just being dishonest about where this came from?
Well, he's disingenuous on this, as he is a lot of things. Sequestration came from the White House, but here's what I'm disappointed in. You mentioned Ronald Reagan 32 years ago. Where did the party of Ronald Reagan go? How could the Republican Party ever agree to a solution that if you failed at the super committee level to find savings, we would gut the Defense Department as the solution again? Fire the politicians, not the soldiers. But he's the commander-in-chief, I'm not. How could any commander-in-chief preside over dismantling the military when the world is on fire? Have you noticed the news lately? It's not exactly there's a peace dividend to be had out there. So no, he's very disingenuous. I'm mad at my Republican colleagues for agreeing with sequestration. I'm working with Senator McCain and Kelly Ayotte to find a replacement that won't destroy the Defense Department. We can cut spending without destroying the military and raising taxes if we sit down and do the hard work. And the president should have us in the White House, instead of blaming us, fixing the problem.
Senator, we've heard the president say that first responders will be laid off. There'll be long waits at airports. How much of this is just pure hyperbole of what's going to happen? I mean, we're talking about 2% of the federal budget, and it may have a big impact on the military, but let's face it, most households are doing with a whole lot less than 2% than they had a few years ago.
Absolutely. A lot of it's political theater designed to scare people, but on the defense side, it's real. Over a decade, if you implement sequestration, we'll lose the ability to modernize our force. The Navy will go down to 232 ships from 285. How do you pivot to Asia? The smallest Army since 1940, cutting another 100,000 people out of the Army, the smallest Air Force in modern history. On the defense side, it's real. But you'll never convince me we can't find $1.2 trillion and we're going to spend $45 trillion over the next decade without destroying the Defense Department if we try. So a lot of this is just scare tactics. But Republicans, don't you think Mike should lead? Don't you think we should have an alternative rather than just saying, President Obama, you go fix this by yourself?
Well, I don't really trust the president to fix it by himself. He asked for
Nor
taxes. Well, he asked for new taxes. He got them in exchange for promising to cut spending. There have been no spending cuts, zero. Now he wants more taxes.
Zero.
Senator, this is, you know, if the Republicans cave in on this, you know, and say, oh, Mr. President, we'll give you some more taxes, he still hasn't put any spending cuts on the table. We might as well fold it up and quit.
The only thing we've cut, really, in a serious way, is the Defense Department. $489 billion has been taken out of the Defense Department. $1.2 trillion in new taxes from Obamacare, $600 billion in new taxes from the fiscal cliff deal. We do not need to raise taxes to fix sequestration. The next time that I would put revenue on the table, Mike, is to flatten the tax code, make it simple, make it fair, take the money and pay down some debt and lower rates for entitlement reform. The next time a Republican should agree to do revenue is when Democrats agree to fix entitlements, save Social Security and Medicare from bankruptcy. Do the big deal. Mr. President, have a legacy worthy of being president. Do the big deal. Quit playing small ball.
Senator, it's always a pleasure to have you, and let me just close by saying thank you for the courageous stand you've taken in trying to keep us from just automatically confirming Chuck Hagel and John Brennan without at least getting some answers on Benghazi. Thank you, sir, for holding fast, and I hope you'll continue. Great to have you here.
We will get to the bottom of this, Mike. Thank you very much.